All right, good afternoon, everybody. My iPhone tells me it's 1:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a great turnout for our first CISMA webinar of 2020. About 35 participants on the line, and I know we're going to have some continue to join in the first 5 minutes or so here. I hope everybody is having a good start to their new year. I also hope everyone is keeping warm this week and that no one has had a hibernating iguana fall onto them or a frozen iguana. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sitting at my desk with a giant blanket because I'm freezing. So hope everyone's keeping warm. So happy to have you back with us today, getting back to these calls in the new year. I just want to highlight in the chat box, if you're able to pull that open, I have added some links that will be referenced during today's call. So you should be able to just highlight and copy these right out of the chat panel there if you want to save any of them. And then also, I see John Heller put out a question there. So if anyone sees that and wants to go ahead and answer, also I'll make sure and try to remember to mention that at the end of the call again as well. So let's go ahead and jump into today's program. Again, welcome. I'm Emily Bell, Florida Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator. And we have these calls monthly on the fourth Wednesday of every month. At 1:30, sorry. And really we want to, share with everybody important updates or work that's going on in the state that can benefit your programs, and then also keep you up to date on what's going on with FLEPPC and CISMA. So we've got a lot of FLEPPC and CISMA updates today going into the new year, lots of cool stuff going on. So our presenter today is Deb Stone. Many of you know her and have worked with her. And she's going to present on the Spatial, Invasive, and Infestation Priority Analysis. I just call it SIIPA. So, she actually presented on this a few years ago on one of our calls. So we felt like it was a good time for a refresher and also a good time to share because it is now online and there's a new handy tool that you can use there. So without further ado, give us just a minute. Deb's going to take over the show here and we'll get going.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Emily, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. And can you see my screen? Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. I'm gonna try and hopefully this will work well with the audio. So like Emily said, the SIIPA tool, or SIIPA, is something that I had developed a while back while I was working with the Nature Conservancy. And we've had some really awesome improvements in the last year or so in turning it into an online tool that's available through EdMaps. And so I'm going to dive a little bit back into some of the original tool and give a brief overview of how it works, but really spend most of the time looking at the online tool that's available. So adaptive management is something we all pay lip service to at least and try for, but it's really hard to actually implement because the time we spend planning is time lost for spraying or burning or any of the other management activities we have to do. However, adaptive management is really critical to using our limited resources in the best way to meet our objectives. And honestly, it's kind of essential to help keep our own mental sanity with this job, especially with invasives. It feels like at best, we are just keeping the ship from sinking as fast as it could. So implementing adaptive management and prioritization are really essential for the best use of our resources. I wanted to develop something that could help speed up this process, that could make it easier, increase the consistency and decrease bias, and that would also help managers make actionable treatment plans. But at the same time, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I was hoping to utilize something that was already available. So I started working on this in 2009 while I was at the Disney Wilderness Preserve to make use of our new database. So my goals were a good core framework that was easily adaptable, could use varying levels of data, and it was relatively easy to use. Essentially, I wanted something that you put your invasive data in, wave your magic wand, and get your prioritized map out. So I looked at a variety of different prioritization systems that were already available, things like the FLEPPC system, CISMA, alien plant ranking system, and there were a good bit that are out there as far as your basic prioritization framework. But nothing was spatially explicit or would really look at individual populations versus just one species across the landscape. So I decided to work on developing a new tool, but use an existing framework as the basis. And I went with the Nature Conservancy's draft weed management plan because the 4 characteristics that were part of it are ones we had already identified as being important. And they're also characteristics that are commonly used in many other prioritization frameworks. So these 4 characteristics, as you can see on the screen, are the impacts of the species, the extent or size of each population, whether there are effective available control methods, and what the quality of the habitat is that that species or population is invading. Now, the model I also wanted to be able to customize to include other aspects if you wanted to consider that. Things that have been used for this are the proximity to protected species, proximity to roads, could also be used to look at water control structures and flood control issues. So there are varying levels of data and varying levels of customization that you can use in the SIIPA model. So what do you need to actually get it to run right out of the box? For the GIS version, obviously you need the ArcGIS basic license. The data that you need to run the model, your invasive species shapefile that contains all your known populations in one shapefile. It should have data on the species and the acreage or size at the minimum. Ideally, it would also have a % cover class. You need a table with all the invasive species that are found within the project area. And each species should be classified based on the impacts and available control methods. Also, some sort of habitat quality map, a grid shapefile for the area of concern. And this is something that if you just have like a project boundary or a property boundary, it's very easy to create in ArcMap. And if you really want to be able to utilize the full functionality of this tool, having a survey history can be very beneficial because that will let you differentiate between absence and unknown. So the SIIPA model or SIIPA model includes 2 main tools. There's the infestation analysis, which is essentially a quick health check of your property or project area. And then the priority analysis, which tells you how to improve the results of next year's health check. You can see here the pictures on the right show what the model steps look like within ArcMap. And it does look kind of complicated, but it's actually a somewhat basic analysis. Simply adds in the needed fields to be able to score each characteristic and do the different rankings. Then it goes through and scores each population on the 4 different characteristics, combines it into one final score based on your preferences. We'll create a grid-based product. And again, if you have a survey history that you can plug into it, they'll compare it with a survey history. So what do all these steps get you? The 2 core products, or at least the ones that I found most useful in using this, were the priority areas map and the priority populations map. So these are the 2 maps on the upper left-hand side. And this is what I would use either independently or together to create my treatment projects and plans for the coming year. Now, if you utilize this tool over several years, the infestation area map is something that you can really help to evaluate your progress and to quickly communicate current status and the work done to stakeholders and partners. So here you can see several iterations of the infestation map at the Disney Wilderness Preserve. If you look here in the bottom, you can see that we were able to get some good control in the lower section, but at the same time, we started to have a blow up of another infested area here. So this enabled me to make a quick decision on switching resources from one area to another. So there are some pretty bells and whistles that come with this tool, but I think the question that most people would be asking is, did this actually make an impact? And from what I've found, yes, this did improve our treatment work at the Disney Wilderness Preserve. In the upper left in this graph here, you can see a score of the mean priority score throughout all the populations that were treated each year. Now, 2009 and 2010 are somewhat like control data because that was before we implemented the SIIPA tool there. And the way this framework is set up, if you have a priority score of 1, that's your first priority. So the lower the score, the higher the priority it actually is. And you can see by implementing the SIIPA tool, we were able to greatly improve the treatment decisions we were making out in the ground. Some of these, an example of the application and a treatment decision we were able to improve is that the pasture restoration here on the left, we were improving the treating torpedo grass and bahia. But after applying the model, we realized these were actually low priority. So the next year I switched over and started treating broken grass within there too, and that turned out to be a much better use of our time. The SIIPA tool also enabled us to adaptively manage our adaptive management process. Initially, we started out with habitat quality, map being based off the natural communities you can see here on the lower left. But after applying it for a few years, we determined it was actually more effective and more logistically useful to use the management zones. So we switched over to that. So that gives a basic overview of the GIS version. If you're interested in trying that, you can download it from the Conservation Gateway website. You can also look at a journal article we had a couple years ago in Ecological Restoration that talks about the application not just at BWP, but also at a couple other properties looking at various scales. And I'm going to stop for a second to make sure that we are still able to hear and see if there are any questions at this point.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there's a little muffling on your end, but as long as you're kind of speaking a little louder and slower, I think we can hear you okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point? You're welcome to type them in or unmute and ask. Or Deb, if you want to go ahead and continue, if you have any questions as she's speaking, go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we'll make sure to get those answered. And I'll also include these links that she has up here when the presentation is available on our website. I'll have these links put underneath it. So Ramirez asks, how easy would it be to update data from year to year?
Updating from year to year was pretty simple. It would just take me less than half a day. It was the initial setup that would be more time consuming. And then when we decided to make changes to how we ranked things or so some of the input classifications, that could be a bit more time consuming.
Great, thank you.
And if at any point I become too muffled, please just jump in and let me know.
All right, one more question.
Okay.
When you switched map from When you switched from map of habitat quality to management units, did that require assigning a habitat quality score to each management unit?
Yes. And let me go back. So we ranked them in each management zone. What we were looking at was whether the structure, the composition, and really the function and big ecological processes like hydrology and fire had been restored in those units. So those were the ways that we ranked our management zones.
Can you go over the mean priority score again?
Yes. So you can look here in the table up here on the upper left. Before we implemented the model, our mean priority scores were just above 4, which means that it was kind of the treatment decisions we were making beforehand were about a moderately in line with our stated prioritization framework. But after applying the model, our average priority scores were around 2, which means that we were actually making much better treatment decisions. So I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but there were actually very few, maybe a dozen individual populations that got the priority score of 1. So the vast majority were given a 2 or a 3. So that is what I've seen from applying this framework in a variety of situations, that the 2 to 3 range shows that you're making, in essence, really good treatment decisions based on what your own personal goals are. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the online version, which is, I think, way cooler. And I know a lot of people don't want to touch GIS with a 10-foot pole. So hopefully this would make this more accessible and more interesting to a lot of our potential users out there. So this project was developed through a grant awarded to the Florida Forest Service and in collaboration with EdMaps. I think we also worked with Georgia and Alabama Forest Service. So the really neat thing about the SIIPA online tool is it makes it a lot easier to implement the adaptive management process. You can see here, it really dives in with the technology that we have available to us today. The way these things are integrated together in this platform make it very easy to go through the steps of adaptive management and just take a little bit of time for the monitoring and evaluation, but the tools are built in and there's a great user interface. So the first step that you're going to want to look at is actually, how do we get there? The SIIPA tool, if you go to the Florida page of EdMaps, you can see up here in the left. On the right, there will be a tab for SIIPA, which takes you to this really great informative website. So as you scroll down through this page, you'll find out a lot more detailed information, and that can help you decide if this could be useful for your projects. The very first step in the adaptive management process is going to be getting your data entered in. I think a lot of us here are fairly familiar with EdMaps, but obviously the first thing you need is a free account. And then there are essentially 3 different ways that you can get your data into the database. There are a variety of mobile apps. There's the web-based forms. And then if you collect data in your own database or in various shapefiles, you could do a bulk upload through the website. The web interface is really user-friendly. I think the Get Me a Team did a fantastic job developing this. You can access it from any computer, from any mobile device, and you don't need any special software. You can print your own maps, add your own data in, really get around and play with your data and look at it in a variety of different ways. And it's all built through the EdMaps platform, so that any new data that comes in is synced in real time. So the next steps are really getting into the tool itself. And here we adapted the ArcGIS model for a web interface. So there are 6 different steps, and they walk you through each of them. The help options within here are very well developed, and you can do this as many times as you want without any cost. And at this point, I'm going to try and switch over to a live demonstration. Can you see the map, Emily, that I have up?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. So this is the interface for the Florida version of the SIIPA tool, what you're going to see when you log in initially. Down here at the bottom are a variety of options of different widgets that have been built in. And there's the SIIPA widget that automatically opens up, gives you some great background information, and points you to other resources about the model and the other tools. When you click on Get Started, the first step is obviously selecting your data. So there are a variety of ways that you can go through and get the, whatever data really matters to you. You can do searches by different attributes, or you can sketch information out. And since I'm up in Tallahassee now and working for the Park Service, I thought I'd use a sample in an area of one of our parks. So Cold Springs is a great place. It's near here. So if you wanted to just sample by data, you can easily draw on the map. Select your data. You can do a circle. Lots of different ways to select your input data on what you want to use. Next step, obviously, is going to be clicking the execute button, and that can take a few minutes. So I've gone through most of the steps and have it separated out now. Step 2 is your habitat quality. Each step has a little informational section up here. It gives you just a few of the questions you might want to consider. Obviously not an exhaustive list, but it'll get you thinking about what options might be important to you for this characteristic. There's also very well made help videos and little help windows that can show you a little bit of information to help improve the process and make it easier for you to apply. The thing I think that wows me the most about this tool is the flexibility that was built into it. You can adjust anywhere from 2 to 7 different classes for each characteristic. You can name give any sort of description. You can adjust the weight of each one. And again, like I said earlier, this system is set up so that the lower the number, the higher the priority, or a weight or score of 1 is your first priority. So the habitat is based off the USGS GAP land classification, and we provided 2 different levels of habitat type, usually more general or more detailed. So again, here we're providing even more flexibility. And you can go through and then you assign each habitat type that falls within your project area one of the categories that you came up here, or you came up with. Once your habitat quality is taken care of, it will then proceed on to available control methods. And we have a lot of the same information here. There's a good basic overview box that points you to some other resources, gives a few questions to ask, and allows you to adjust the number of classes within this characteristic. So in this situation, I was thinking about a place where you might have limited resources, and so you're focusing on how frequent you want to do treatment. I adjusted, it will automatically put in a weight, but you can adjust that to the characteristics or the levels that work best for your project. It automatically populates up a list of all the species within your project area, and again, you simply assign them one of the categories that you came up with. The next characteristic that you would go to is the impact of each species. So there is no single one right way to prioritize, but sitting there, spending a little bit of time thinking about it will really help improve. I like to say that there is one wrong way to prioritize, and that's not to really think about it. So again, this is a very similar process. There's really good help that can help move you through, and the videos that literally walk you through step by step in each of these. You get the same species list that you had for the control methods, and here you assign them whatever class that you came up with that works for your property. The final step in the characteristics is the size of infestations or extent. Now this, I think, is a really cool stuff that's going on behind the scenes here. So in EdMaps, there's a variety of size data that can be incorporated in. A lot of the points that are put in do not have any sort of gross area or infested area associated with them. So behind the scenes, this tool looks at your data and determines whether you have no size data, whether you have gross acreage or infested acreage, and then automatically assigns you one of these three categories based off what is available within your data. We also provide a natural breaks analysis so that if you don't have like a set range or set size break already in mind, this looks at where the natural breaks are within your data and can supply this to you pretty easily. So in entering this stuff in, the way that it's set up initially is following the philosophy that your least infested areas are your most important to treat. So the points that have a farther distance away are the ones that would be your higher priority. And the ones that are your closer to each other, that's a more infested area and would therefore be a lower priority. So you take the data, if you were using the natural breaks, and enter it in here in a similar format to what you see right here. So you're starting at the bottom, and you can see it automatically changes the range in the first one to whatever you had as the break for the lower category. Now, once you've got each of the characteristics ranked, you then need to decide how the characteristics compare to each other. And you can adjust these. They start out all given equal weight, but in some situations, if you're concerned maybe with whole systems management, the type of habitats and the extent or level of infestation in an area might be more important to you because those have a bigger impact on the quality of the habitat that you're managing. You can also select a cutoff for your lowest priority, such that, let's say, anything below a 7, you don't even want to worry with. You know your resources are very limited, and so you can't even get to anything below that level. And then a final output, you get there in the web map. So you can see here, you've got both the grid product and the individual points. So each point is color-coded based on the priority that it gets based on the framework that you just entered. So there's different options you could do in creating your treatment plan from here. You could simply go down your list and open up your data and see what your most important is. So open up your attribute table. Just go over sort descending or sort ascending. And it shows you which ones your most important populations are. So here, if you just wanted to go with most important down to least, you would have your rank. When you start at this treatment, this population, treat that, and move on down your list. But I think a lot of us tend to focus more on the logistical component. So you'd want to look at maybe areas that have a higher concentration or that are a higher priority. So for instance, in this little cell right here, you do have one of your higher priority populations, but there are also some lower ones. So this area might not be the most important. But if you look at some of them over here, there's only one reported infestation that's a pretty high priority, and it's very well isolated. So there's a variety of ways that you could go through to take this product and create an actionable weed management plan. This will also produce a report. There's some information here on the side. We're in the beta testing of sending this to mobile, and I'll talk a little bit about that some more in a minute. So that is essentially the SIIPA tool and the products that you can get. Other things that you can do with the products, you can export all this file to GIS. So if you don't want to go through the process of using it in GIS, but you can do further analysis, all of the different parts of this tool will be exported to a geodatabase that you can use. It produces a report that you can save as a PDF. You can take this out into the field to help you with your treatment. You can share this with stakeholders or other things that you need to do. A step that we're working on at the moment that's being tested out in Utah is sending this to EdMaps Pro. Most of us have probably seen and maybe played around a little bit with this, but you can get this on your phone, and that will really help with navigation and some of the on-the-ground treatment planning and logistics. So you've gone through your prioritization process, you have all your information and your plan set up now. Getting back to the adaptive management process, you can go out, use this to start doing your treatments, getting the work done on the field. So you follow your treatment plan, you can target all your top priorities, and use the EdMaps Pro or other navigation on your phone to get out to the populations that you really need to treat, that you have determined to be the most important based on your goals. The next step is monitoring and evaluating. So especially with utilizing EdMaps Pro or any of the EdMaps apps, makes it a lot easier to incorporate into your adaptive management. You can go back to your site, you can update the information, you can add new surveys, and then use this to help evaluate whether you are successful in your goals. You can repeat this as many times as needed. You can use the tool as an active component in your weed management plans and document your success to share with others. So that's what is available currently for Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. But I think what's really cool to see is there's a lot more that could be done with this framework to build it and make it really useful. And Utah has actually taken this and really run with it and done some amazing things and are in the process of doing some even more amazing things. They've incorporated additional data through susceptibility models is one I think the neatest thing. So they have, the University of Idaho has identified sites that are more susceptible to particular weed species. So this base layer is added in, and as people take more data and incorporate it, it's used to fine-tune the susceptibility models and build an even better product. Utah actually requires running through their SIIPA tool as a part of their grant application for using state funds for invasive plant treatments. So it takes it through a framework that's very similar to this, but they've tweaked a little bit to meet their needs, and gives it a total score out of 100 points that then ranks it with other proposed projects. And they have a lot of really neat future improvements that are planned. Like I said earlier, they're currently testing the EdMaps Pro integration and seeing how that works out in the field. They are planning to do an admin dashboard as part of the website to help with the product or project tracking and management. Other considerations they have for longer range improvements are including climate change and soil data, and maybe even doing invasive species spread so you can see what the impacts of no action would be over time. So in summary, if you want to have a more customized framework or you really like diving in and playing with GIS, you can go to the Conservation Gateway to download the model that I showed you today, as well as the models at 2 other different scales. There's also the online versions for both the Southeast and for Utah that are available. So you can go, that have a much more user-friendly interface and are easier to apply. Benefits of prioritizing invasive species are really important for what we're doing. We can never get to everything that we're working on. So if we don't make smart decisions about what we actually do, we might end up actually negatively impacting the properties we're trying to save. And the SIIPA model can quickly apply your prioritization framework to all the individual populations. This enables you to have a concrete and actionable treatment plan, makes you more consistent, and removes a little bit of the bias, at least in our treatment decisions. And it also gives pretty little maps that you can share with others to improve institutional knowledge and to communicate the situation on your property very quickly. Whether you're using the online version or the GIS version, I highly recommend you to incorporate all stakeholders in the process. Having a robust prioritization framework will really help and provide a better product. You should also thoroughly document what your framework is and any additional steps that you've taken. And don't hesitate to adapt as needed. Just because you started out setting it in one particular way doesn't mean that that will work for you for all time. And that ends. I think we're a little ahead of schedule. So are there any further questions?
Yeah, so Deb, I'm gonna give you some questions that came in via the chat box. So going back, let's see, the first question that we didn't get to. Do you know if this model is still being used at the Disney Wilderness Preserve?
No, I do not.
Okay. Is there a way to track prescribed fire in this database?
Not that I know of. The EdMaps is just looking at invasive species.
Okay. If data is uploaded into the web-based model, how long and where is that data stored? Is this data able to be viewed by others accessing the web-based model?
So I am not 100% familiar with EdMaps, and I don't know if we have some of the EdMaps staff on here that can answer that. But from my experience, most data is available to the public. Anyone can come in and see what the points are. However, I think if you mark it as occurring on private property, that can keep it from being visible. And what was the first part of that question?
If data is uploaded into the web-based model, how long and where is that data stored?
That would be on the servers that are managed by UGA and the EdMaps staff. And I do not believe that they have any sort of archiving framework or deletion framework. I think that is there essentially permanently.
Okay. So the data essentially is housed within EdMaps.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the products from running the SIIPA tool are temporary. So you would want to download those products for yourself if you want to save those and use them in the future. But the base data, the input data, is stored within the EdMaps database.
Okay, gotcha. Are the grids generated in the online tool? Let's see. Are the grids generated in the online tool, are they an input shapefile you have to upload? Does that make sense?
Not quite. Can we get some clarification on that? The input for the database just comes straight from EdMaps. And the Utah part of it, I'm not familiar with. I think I saw that Becca is on here and might be able to give us some more answers about the Utah application.
Okay. So is the online version of the tool available for the states of Washington and Oregon?
Not yet.
Okay. Does the GIS version have a cost associated with it?
Not with downloading it. It is available for free through the Nature Conservancy's Conservation Gateway. But you would need to have the ArcGIS license, and that does have a cost associated with it.
Okay. Would this work on the free ArcGIS version?
With Esri's product, yes, I think it would work on the free version. With other products such as Q, I have not tried that. It's set and designed within Esri's ArcMap, so I would assume there would need to be a lot of changes to get it to work in something like Q.
Okay. All right, great. So that's all the questions that have come in via the group chat. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Deb and Becca. Someone did ask, do you have any estimate of when the online tool might be available for Oregon and Washington?
No, I don't. Becca, can you chime in?
Yeah, this is a state-by-state contract, and so we haven't, yeah, we are not even in discussion at all with Washington or Oregon at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then, Deb, someone was asking about getting the publication, citation, and links that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. When we switch back over, could you possibly pull those links out of your PowerPoint and throw them up in the group chat?
Of course.
Great. Okay. And then, sorry, hold on. Yeah, so we're going to switch back over. And then, yes, as I mentioned too, I'll include those links on the website when we get this up. So let me just get back to presentation. Okay. All right. So thank you, Deb, so much. That was a great presentation on a really valuable tool. And again, anybody feel free to reach out to Deb and Becca for more information. I'm just looking for one thing to pull up, and then we're going to go into our, there it is. I'm going to our FISP updates. Okay. So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of good stuff coming up into 2020. One thing that you guys may have seen some emails about, I sent something to the CISMA listserv earlier in November, and then I just got some information out that went straight to your CISMA leads. So you're the chairs or co-chairs of your CISMAs, being a little more specific about this, but I wanted to kind of fill you in on what's been going on with National Invasive Species Awareness Week. So if you have participated in this in the past, essentially National Invasive Species Awareness Week has been run by the National Invasive Species Council in Washington, D.C., and it was really focused on getting legislative attention on some of these issues. There was a legislative agenda for it, and there are some groups like the Aquatic Weed Management Associations out west that have a long-standing relationship with this legislative outreach and work they've been doing. So over the past few years, though, the resources and capacity to continue the level that had happened in previous years of DC efforts kind of had gone away. And then this past year, with the dissolution of the Invasive Species Task Force in DC, it kind of really died off. And so luckily, the North American Invasive Species Management Association stepped up to kind of take the reins on NISA and make sure this is something that would continue. And so when they did that, they reached out to everyone who's participated and kind of asked, you know, what do we want to see this become, or do we want to keep it the same? Or so we've been having a discussion about that. And essentially how it shook out was that there definitely is still value in that legislative advocacy, and people want to see that continue. And that this week, the last week of February, is strategic in reaching the audience they're looking to reach. But there was also a recognition that it would be valuable for NISA to help raise local awareness and help local stakeholders reach their own decision makers. And so just stepping back really quick for a moment, for Florida, we have typically done some events and outreach during NISA and just kind of promoted it that way and said, you know, we're having these work days, or here's a workshop, and this is during National Invasive Species Awareness Week. And so last year, we did our first weed wrangle effort in association with National Invasive Species Awareness Week. The weed wrangle being a specific program within with the Garden Club of America that they started, which is spreading across the United States. And so essentially this discussion with the stakeholders for NISA, part of the issue is that because Florida and a few other parts of the South are in a little bit of a different situation than other parts of the country, They wanted to have their week that involved volunteer outreach and getting people in the field and actually working on invasives later in the year, because it's too cold still in most of the country to do that type of work in February. And so the decision was that NESAW Part 1 would remain consistent as the third week of February, and it would be focused on legislative advocacy, so less on the local statewide efforts. But they're going to do promotion of national and local legislative actions. There'll be position papers that come out that can be shared. They're going to provide some tools and resources, and they are going to do the webinar series that has been done over the past few years. And then there's going to be a NESAW Part 2. So essentially, kind of the strategy here is that, you know, we've got this, we're hitting them early in kind of the winter time, and then we're going to hit them again in the summer with this National Invasive Species Awareness Week with a focus on local events and awareness. So here in Florida, we are going to kind of do the opposite of everybody else, in that we're still going to host our volunteer events during February, because it's just too hot for us once we get past, once we start getting into May. So we are going to have and we're rebranding a little. So we're going to call it Florida Weed Wrangle Week. This is going to build on last year's first annual weed wrangle efforts. And we're going to continue to highlight other things that go on during that week. So a good example of that is that the Southwest Florida CISMA's annual invasive species workshop typically falls during that time. We're going to continue to promote those events as a part of this whole awareness week effort. And then when we go into the May 16th to 23rd, that second part of NESAW, we're going to have our own Florida Invasive Species Awareness Week, and we're going to focus on education and outreach, be a little more inclusive of all taxa, because when we focus on the weed wrangle, it really is putting a lot of the attention on plants. So it's going to be a lot of social media efforts. This is where we would look to get local governments do declarations. So as opposed to doing them during that third week of February, as some folks have in the past, we're going to look to have them done during this week, and we'll send some resources to help with that. And then we'll be having this discussion about the possibility of having different workshops and things like that. So more to come on this May 16th and 23rd week shortly, but I want to kind of just go over the details for the rapidly approaching Florida Weed Wrangle Week. So as I mentioned, that's going to be Monday, February 24th through Saturday, February 29th. We've already got quite a few events on the calendar. So you can see here the list of weed wrangles as well as events that we currently have up. And then this is an image of the map. And if you scroll up to the top of the chat box, this is where those links will start coming in handy as well. There's a direct link to the new NESAW website. There's a link to this map that you just see a screenshot of here, where you can click on the little icons and it'll tell you specifically what that event is. And so we are definitely a little behind the curve. We've been trying to, you know, figure out the direction that NESAW was going to go, and we're playing a little bit of catch up. So luckily, because this has been the week we've traditionally done things, a lot of the CISMAs were already planning their events for this week. And so we will definitely start coordinating earlier in 2021. But if your CISMA has a weed wrangle event or event that's not represented here, please definitely shoot me an email. Just let me know so we can get everything up, and we'll start really pushing this information out very soon. This is also all going to go up on the website. So this map, similar to last year, there'll be the interactive map will be embedded into the Florida Weed Wrangle page on our website, and I'm going to send an email out. That should be up soon. It's being worked on as we speak. So really just the main takeaway here is if there's anything missing from this list, just let me know so we can get that filled out, and we will start kind of putting the word out about this effort. And just to reiterate as well, similar to last year, when you host your local weed wrangle, we do kind of rely on your local outreach sources for promoting it. So definitely hoping the CISMAs will be sharing that information. And then we kind of, FISP is kind of sharing it more on the statewide scale. So we'll be putting it out to all of our stakeholders. But the CISMAs have a more localized reach that we need to get at as well. So moving on from that, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And again, like I said, we'll get the website updated shortly. So want to highlight the annual CISMA workshop at FLEPPC coming up, as well as the FLEPPC conference itself. So these links are also in the chat box up at the very top that you find here. So registration is now open for the FLEPPC workshop. So I think there's a free t-shirt if you register by, I want to say March 1st. So get in there and register today. The sooner you register, the better. And then also you can reserve a room at the location under the group rate, and that link is here for you as well. So it's going to be a great conference. And then of course our annual CISMA workshop is the day before the conference kicks off, so it's on March 24th. This is our draft agenda. We're going to share with you the targets that FISP has set up for 2020 to help track progress on our strategic plan. We're also going to talk about some strategies for collecting more information from the CISMAs and helping communicate success on the local level. And then we're going to close out the afternoon with a CISMA roundtable discussion, and we'll be reaching out to you and those folks who are going to participate to provide some information on your strengths and weaknesses as a CISMA so that we can support each other throughout this discussion and find where, you know, pair up those CISMAs whose strengths are another CISMA's weakness and vice versa. So hopefully these are already on your calendar. We'll also be sending out a registration for the workshop itself, just so that we'll have an idea of who's planning to attend. So look for that in your inbox soon. And then lastly, I just want to highlight some upcoming events. So this is from our events calendar on our website. You can find kind of all things going on across the state. As you can see, lots of different great workshops and work days coming up. This link is also available in the chat box. I wanted to highlight really quickly, the International Wild Hog Conference is being held in Jacksonville, Florida this year on April 6th through 9th. And actually, as soon as we get off this call, I'm going to forward an email to the CISMA listserv with all the details about that conference. So it's a really great opportunity that the conference is here in Florida. It's usually somewhere internationally. So if feral hogs are a big part of your work or something you're really concerned about, this is a great opportunity for Florida to really kind of represent our work in that arena. And then also on May 4th through 7th, the UF IFAS Aquatic Weed Control Short Course dates are set for that. So just wanted to share that with everybody. And then also our CISMA call schedule going into 2020. I'm really excited about the speakers we have coming up. So you're not going to want to miss next month this presentation from Dr. Sam Wisely on the diseases of feral hogs and other invasive mammals. This is a really interesting and important presentation talking about the concerns we have with feral hogs and the different zoonotic diseases that can be transferred to other native species or to people. And she also talks a little bit about the recent research on the rhesus macaques in Silver Springs and some of the issues with them and some other mammals. So this is a really great one you're going to want to have on your calendar. We will not have a call in March. We'll be at the FLEPPC conference. In April, we're going to have a social media boot camp. Shelby with the UF IFAS Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. She is their social media person, and so she's going to give us a rundown of just how to use these tools to best get our message across. So she's going to kind of give us the do's and don'ts and the best practices for using these different media that we have available. And then we're still filling in some calls. We've got some other really interesting topics coming up. And then in July, we're going to have an update on the Brazilian pepper biological controls that were recently released. So Dr. Carrie Mintier is going to join us to kind of give us some first insights into how they're doing. Have they established? Are they seeing any impacts? What's the plan for getting this beetle out to the public? So that's going to be in July. And you'll see more of these dates get filled in as we go. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions about anything I just went over, please feel free to reach out to me. Make sure you get me any Florida Weed Wrangle Week events or weed wrangles, and look forward to chatting with everybody again next week. quick reminder, past calls are always available on our website at floridainvasives.org/CISMA calls, and it usually takes about a week to get them up. So this one will be up probably by next week or the week after at the latest. Also, make sure you're following us on all the social media, floridainvasives.org with Facebook, and we're at protect_Florida on Instagram and Twitter. So I want to just thank Deb Stone again for joining us today and providing that fabulous presentation. And with that, we'll wrap up, and I look forward to talking with you all again in February. Thank you so much.